December 3, 2005, San Angelo, Texas. A cold night settled over the quiet neighborhood, but inside one home, something unthinkable was happening. What happens when a mother of two vanishes without a trace, and no one reports her missing for nearly 10 years? What happens when her remains are finally uncovered, buried beneath the crumbling soil of an old, abandoned racetrack? This isn't a story about a woman who ran away. It's a story about betrayal, about silence, and about a dark secret that stayed buried, until someone finally cracked. This case unravels a web of deceit, a clandestine affair, and a chilling confession that ultimately led to justice. But the road to that truth? Twisted, cruel, and unforgiving. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. And make sure to stay with me, because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Naomi Michelle Miller was born in 1971 and raised in the heart of Texas. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. But to her two children, ages 5 and 10, she was their entire world. Naomi was a mother before anything else. Those who knew her described her as warm, gentle, and deeply devoted to her family. She was the kind of woman who never missed a school function, who made sure her kids were tucked in at night, and who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, without ever letting it show. At home, Naomi managed everything. Cooking, cleaning, caring for the kids, it was her daily rhythm. And in the weeks before she vanished, nothing seemed out of place. She was still that steady presence, creating a sense of safety and routine in her household. But behind that stability, something darker was growing. Because even in the comfort of her own home, Naomi didn't know she was living with the people who would one day bury her secrets, alongside her body. And no one, not her parents, not her children, could have imagined that December 3, 2005, would be the last day they'd ever see her alive. December 3, 2005. Naomi Michelle Miller crawled into bed inside her San Angelo home. Next to her, her husband, Robert Miller. Also in the house that night, LaDonna Gail Yoder, Robert's girlfriend, who lived with them as part of a relationship Naomi had agreed to. But sometime after the lights went out, Naomi disappeared. She was never seen alive again. There was number 911 call. No missing person report. No frantic search party. Instead, Robert told family and friends that Naomi had simply left, walked out on her children, her home, her entire life. And for nearly 10 years, that lie held. It wasn't until May of 2015, almost a full decade later, that someone finally reported Naomi missing. By then, Naomi's name had vanished from bank statements, phone records, and employment history. She hadn't used her social security number. Hadn't accessed medical care. To the world, it was as if Naomi Miller had never existed. When the Tom Green County Sheriff's Office began looking, they found silence. No trail. No activity. No explanation. But one thing was clear, Naomi Miller didn't leave on her own. And someone had worked very hard to keep it that way. By the time authorities began their investigation in 2015, Naomi Miller had already been missing for nearly 10 years. There were no phone calls, no bank withdrawals, no social media activity. Nothing to suggest she had gone anywhere, or that she was even alive. To investigators, that silence wasn't just strange, it was incriminating. And then, a tip came in. Someone pointed a finger at the man Naomi had once trusted most, her husband, Robert Miller. That single tip cracked open a door that had stayed shut for far too long. Investigators began digging into Robert's life, his finances, his history, his personal relationships. And what they found was anything but ordinary. Robert Lamar Miller was born in 1972, growing up in the heart of Texas. As an adult, Robert settled in San Angelo, where he married Naomi Michelle Miller. Together, They had 2 children, aged 5 and 10 at the time of Naomi's disappearance. The Millers managed the San Angelo Speedway, a local racetrack, intertwining their personal and professional lives. Robert hadn't been living alone. He'd been sharing a home with LaDonna Gail Yoder, his girlfriend, who had also lived with Naomi during the time of her disappearance. It was a 3-way relationship, complex, unconventional, and eventually, fatal. Robert had never reported Naomi missing. His explanations didn't add up. And as investigators pushed harder, his version of events began to unravel. But there were major obstacles. 10 years had passed. Memories had faded. Physical evidence? Practically non-existent. Still, the dynamic inside that home, the jealousy, the tension, the power struggle, became the center of the investigation. Robert Miller emerged as suspect number 1. And LaDonna Gail Yoder wasn't far behind. The truth, investigators believed, was buried. And the people who buried it had been hiding in plain sight. For nearly 12 years, the truth about what happened to Naomi Miller remained buried. But in 2017, everything changed. LaDonna Gail Yoder, Robert Miller's longtime girlfriend and live-in partner, broke her silence. She walked into the sheriff's office and confessed. In chilling detail, LaDonna told investigators what they had long suspected: Naomi hadn't run away. She had been murdered in her own bedroom, while her children slept just down the hall. According to LaDonna, Robert held Naomi down while she placed a pillow over her face. Together, they smothered her to death. Then, they wrapped her body, loaded it into a car, and drove out to a place they believed no one would ever think to look: the old San Angelo Speedway. Following LaDonna's confession, law enforcement searched the now-defunct racetrack. And there, beneath layers of dirt and time, they made a grim discovery: human remains. Forensic investigators confirmed what LaDonna had already admitted: it was Naomi Michelle Miller. 12 years. Dozens of lies. But now, the truth had a voice. And it came from someone who had helped silence Naomi in the first place. On March 2, 2017, nearly 12 years after Naomi Miller vanished, Robert Miller was arrested. Less than 2 weeks later, on March 14, his longtime girlfriend, LaDonna Yoder, was taken into custody as well. Both were charged in connection with Naomi's murder. At first, they denied everything. Both Robert and LaDonna pleaded not guilty. But with LaDonna's confession on record and Naomi's remains recovered from the San Angelo Speedway, the walls were closing in fast. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the possibility of life behind bars, the pair struck plea deals. Robert Miller, Naomi's husband, the father of her children, the man who helped end her life, pleaded guilty to murder. He was sentenced to 38 years in prison. LaDonna Gail Yoder, his accomplice and live-in partner, received 35 years. For Naomi's family, it wasn't closure, but it was justice. After more than a decade of uncertainty, they finally had answers. They could finally lay Naomi to rest. In court, her loved one spoke through tears, grappling with the pain of what was lost, and the relief that the truth had finally come out. Naomi's voice had been taken from her. But in the end, the people who silenced her could no longer hide. Naomi Miller's case is a haunting reminder of how the most familiar places can hold the darkest secrets. A mother of 2, gone without a trace, her story hidden behind years of silence, deception, and manipulation. This case reveals the painful complexity of human relationships, and the relentless work it takes to break through years of lies. For law enforcement, the obstacles were immense: no crime scene, no witnesses, and over a decade of lost time. But they didn't give up. And when LaDonna Yoder finally confessed, the truth that had been buried, literally, was brought to light. Justice didn't come quickly. But it came. And Naomi Miller's name was finally spoken in a courtroom, not as a missing person, but as a victim who deserved to be heard. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts below, we read every comment. And if you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. Thank you for watching.